week's edition of the Gersnet Weekly Podcast, the independent Rangers podcast, which is brought to you by fans for fans, where the content is free. This is the third attempt to get this show on the road. Hopefully you can hear me now. I'm your host, Colin Armstrong. As I say to you every week, guys, it's not just the pod we have here. We have the website. There's the forums on there. You can see articles, match previews, all that kind of stuff. Frankie has his social media. There's a history archive on the website as well. If you like what we do here at Gersnet, then please give the YouTube channel a wee subscription. We're approaching 5,000. Also put the word out there on social media, let your friends know that we're here. I'm not going to introduce my guests for the third time. They're Stuart and Chris Jack from the Glasgow Times. We'll just go straight into it. We've had some technical issues tonight. I mean, we're getting some comments back saying that you can't hear it. We can hear one another, so we're not quite sure what the issue is in terms of why it's not sounding so good on the YouTube channel. But as I said, hopefully it sounds a bit better now. I think Frankie's looking at the comments to see if there's anything coming through. And does it all seem good?
It still sound you're a bit quiet, Colin, but we'll just bash on and do this, and then I can release it tomorrow and folk can grab it elsewhere.
Right, okay. Right, so obviously the win today at Livingston, Frankie, Gio's second game, his first game domestically in the league. Overall, good performance, great win at what can be a tricky venue.
Aye, absolutely. I think we're all very happy with the start. I actually put out a tweet just before the game suggesting that we'd probably have to be patient, and it'd be one of those days where it might be a one goal that gets us the win. But obviously we really started quite well and got 2 goals. So. Can't really argue with that at all, and it was just a pity that we couldn't maintain that through the first half. But to be fair, the second half I thought we controlled a lot better without still playing fantastic, but a well-deserved win in the end.
This Scott Arfield started his second game in a week. He came in kind of from the cold last week against Hibs, got a goal, another goal today, so sort of 2 starts, 2 goals. He's not featured much this season, but you know, in terms of goal, I think it's the type of thing we've been missing this season. You know, a run for deep, going beyond the strikers, going sort of straight through the middle of the defence. Great ball for Tav, and the touch and the finish for Arfield was superb. Really.
It's a very Scott Arfield goal.
Yeah.
He's probably the only midfielder in the squad out of all the options that the Rangers have. It's probably the only one that you would say he will go and do that. You can't rely on Steve Davis or Kamara. Brian Jack went through a wee spell with Egypt and a couple and managed to get forward a bit more. But Arfield is that one you're looking for, those runs. He times them really well. His touch was lovely to control the pass from Tar, and a great finish. The keeper's caught in no man's land almost. It can't come out. He can't go back by that time, and Arfield just thinks it over the top of him. A really nice finish, a really good start from Rangers. And I say it's the type of thing that Scott Arfield is very good at. He's not going to be somebody you build the midfield around this season, but in certain games or on certain occasions, he does just offer that and a wee bit something different. And he's certainly taking his chances these days when they come along for him.
Just on that, Chris, is that something we'll be missing though? I hear a lot of fans, and I wouldn't say I disagree with them, that a lot of the players that we have in the middle of the park are a bit samey. You know what I mean? And there isn't a huge amount of goal threat. And as you say, Arfield does provide that. You know what I mean? He is. I also think it's not just his runs for deep. I also think when he gets the ball, he is one that always looks for a forward pass. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Other ones, I'm not saying they're safe, but they can tend to go side to side. Sometimes they're back. Arfield does one. Even if he gets the ball, he's back to goal. He turns and looks for a forward pass. And I do think that's something we'll be missing in the middle of the park this season.
I think that makeup of the squad, it's a very Steven Gerrard thing to have. And he's also built that squad over the last 3 seasons, and the midfield options that he's got suit that style. He was looking for the 3 guys in the middle of the park to really control the game, and didn't really need, for most occasions, a Scott Arfield type over the last year or so almost. I think the way that Van Bronckhorst has set the side up, more of a midfield too, and then the front players been a bit more free in their positions. I think there's probably more of a space for someone like Scott Arfield in that system. it could maybe be a role for someone like a Bakuna if he can really show what he's got. I know Gerard was a fan of him and thought he could bring something to the party. We've not seen that much of him so far, and it's probably too early to tell whether he can add that to the squad. But I think the way that Van Bronckhorst looks to set the side out just in the initial viewings, I think there is going to be scope for a Scott Arfield type player. Now at his stage of his career, it's not going to be Scott Arfield every single week. You can't rely on him to go and get 10, 12 goals over the course of the season. I think there's going to be a role for him just to offer that something a wee bit different from the midfield pairings or the midfield three that we saw in the first part of the season.
Frankie, the first sort of 20-25 minutes today, I would argue that's the most we've looked like how we were last season, if you know what I mean. We were really aggressive, really on the front foot, high tempo. That's something I think's been missing from this season. We've been very pedestrian, taking 1 and 2 extra touches. For that first 10, 15, 20, 25 minutes, I actually turned to my boy at one point. I said, "So this is more like it." This is how we played last year. Blew teams away, high tempo, almost like going for the jugular kind of thing. And it genuinely looked like at one point I thought we're going to blow them out of the water here.
Aye. It's like I said earlier. Say the first 15, 20 minutes we were knocking the ball about really quite well, creating chances, getting in behind. I think that the sort of change the system where we had Hadji and Kent a lot wider, kind of stretched their back three a lot more and created space for us and allowed us in terms of the midfield as well just to get the ball, move the ball and switch the play. And when we play with that kind of tempo, it really makes a big difference to us. As soon as we drop that tempo, then that's when we kind of struggle. And okay, you can't expect any team to play at a really high tempo for 90 minutes, but it does kind of concern me that we go through periods of games, maybe 20 minutes here or there, where we do quite well, then we just seem to sort of back off. And I don't know if that was something that's came in this season under the previous manager, or if it's just something that the players have sort of taken upon themselves, maybe lacking the same kind of fitness that we've seen in previous seasons. I don't know, but it's something that's still a concern. We've seen it again today, and as much as we played well and deserved to win and controlled the game, there was that first half or second part of the first half where we allowed Levy back into the game, and it's maybe just a lack of confidence. I don't know, but there is a concern there, and it's something that Gio definitely has to examine and try to fix with a lot of tough games coming up in December, which we're going to discuss later in the show.
Chris, the second goal, it almost follows on to what we're talking about there in terms of, quick tempo and, just teams not being able to live with us, 1-2 touch, but just, as I say, blowing teams out of the water. That second goal again kind of reminded me how we were last season. Good ball out to Ken. He does some nice stuff into Morelos. A lovely wee flick from Morelos into Aribo, and the finish for Aribo is just top drawer. The way he curls it in the top corner, and these again it reminded me of that team last season, especially about this time of the year. I thought for sort of October to about March time was when Rangers were at their absolute best last season. And it kind of reminded me of a top draw goal and a great move at a time we were really, really on top of them. And as I said to Frankie earlier on there, at that point I thought, we are absolutely going to blow this team away. But you have to give Aribo so much credit for that finish because it was top draw.
He's one of the few players in the squad that could actually pull that off. I know there's been a real frustration over the last, not just this season, but at the stages last season as well. Rangers don't have shots from distance often enough. They don't try their luck, and that's not a case of just firing one in just to see who it bounces off of. It's actually being able to look up, pick a spot and go for it. Aribo has that ability to pick a spot. He knew exactly what he was doing, saw the keeper off his line, judged the trajectory of it perfectly. I know Sky asked him after the game if he
meant it.
He certainly meant it as a great finish, and like yourself, Colin, at that stage I thought it's going to be 3-4. Rangers can go and pick a number. I thought they'll go and get the third fairly quickly and then just cruise through the rest of the game. Slightly frustrated that didn't happen, obviously, and I think that will be a point that the manager will emphasised to them. You can't afford against the better teams and against the teams that they've got running up, coming up in this run. You can't go to Pittodrie and slack off for 20 minutes, half an hour. You can't go to Easter Road and Tynecastle. Certainly can't go to Parkhead and do that. They got away with it today because in the end they were far better than Livingston on the day. And even though they gave them a wee sniff, it was never going to come back and cost them. That's something that they will have to try and rectify over the next few weeks. But to go out and start like that, a real sign of intention. There've been so many times this season falling behind early on. They've been sluggish out the box. If they can maintain those levels for just a wee bit longer, they're going to be very hard to stop on their day.
Frankie, I mean, I always find it difficult to try and judge how teams are setting up when it's on the telly, because obviously you're only getting whatever the camera's showing at that particular point. When you're at the game, especially when like it's a goal kick or whatever, you can see how teams are setting up in terms of their shape and stuff like that. But I did notice one thing. At one point, I thought Rangers were playing with a diamond today. You know, it seemed to me like Hadji and Arfield were sort of wider. Glenn Kamara sitting really deep, and Aribo sitting almost like as a number 10 with Kent and Morelos, the top two. But again, watching on the TV, it's quite difficult. But there was no doubt that Glenn Kamara, when Livingston had possession today, was sitting a lot deeper. At times, it almost looked like a back five. You know, he was sitting almost right in between the two centre halves. And it kind of tied in with that conversation. Obviously, we had that the Feyenoord blogger on a couple of weeks ago, and he made the comment that Gio likes a nil. You know, he's quite a conservative manager. He likes his teams not to concede and build on that. And that, when I saw that, I thought, well, that ties in with what we've been informed. You know what I mean? It does look like he's very much someone who doesn't want to concede and then build on that.
Aye. I think it kind of made sense. I mean, Livingston like to go long and direct quite quickly when they get possession. I mean, they have Alan Forrester on one side and the Colombian chap on the left hand side that fell out with Morelos at the end of the game. So they're quite happy to push men on and then look with play off the focal point of the striker. And to be honest, most of the game we dealt it quite well. And there was one ball just after we scored the second goal that we didn't really do fantastically well. And then obviously there was the goal itself, and that point, the Livy goal, Kamara hadn't quite got back to support goals, so maybe that's what kind of put him off or put us off, and it left us open that one time. In terms of the formation, I kind of struggled to identify what we were doing. I thought it was a 4-1-4-1 at times, and because everybody took sort of their turn of getting forward and trying to support Morelos, and it was the good thing as well with Gio so far is everybody seems to be switching positions. Kent was taking a turn on the right hand side as well as the left hand side at times, and Aribo was getting forward, Arfield was getting forward, and they were both coming deep. So there was a lot more interaction and made us much less predictable, and I think that was a big part of our game plan today.
Chris, I mean, how did it look for you in the press box in terms of the shape today? Because as I say, when you're watching on the TV, it's difficult. You know, when we're at Ibrox, you can see quite clearly how Rangers are trying to set up, but today it was a wee bit tricky.
I think the fact that it's trickier to pinpoint it was actually the whole point of Rangers today. They're very, very fluid in the positions. I think it's clear that he wants Ryan Kent to stay a bit higher and a bit wider, but then that's not really the case on the right hand side with Ganesh Hadji, mainly because he doesn't want to have the same burst of pace that Kent has got. So it almost leaves Rangers slightly lopsided, but then they can switch, or once they switch sides, and as Frankie said, no, Kent was over on the right at times. You can find Aribo drifting out. I think it's noticeable that Morelos isn't doing as much drifting to either side and dropping a lot deeper. I know Gio mentioned after the game on Thursday night, he needs his striker to be in the penalty box. I think the deliveries from wide could have been better at times today, and if you're going to say you want your number 9 to be a penalty box striker, the quality of the balls into his area have to be a bit better at times. But I think there's certainly a real fluidity about the way that Rangers have played over the last 2 games, and I think it's quite exciting to see how that is going to develop.
Frankie, there's also the issue with the fullbacks. I'm going completely rogue here off the agenda, so I'm sorry you're getting lumped with this. But it's based on the conversation that we're having at the moment. There was also a comment today in the analysis that, you know, Gio looks at the fullbacks more as defenders than people going forward, and he's looking for the wide men to produce the creativity and the chances for Morelos. So are we also maybe looking at, you know, because under Steven Gerrard the fullbacks were integral to how Rangers played, you know, overlapped all the time. You could maybe argue that they've done more in that sense than they do defensively. So are we potentially looking at a sort of shift in remit for the likes of Borna and Tav under Gio?
Aye, I think there has been tentative signs of that. Certainly, but pre-match Sky showed a graphic in terms of the sort of positions during the game, and normally under Gerrard, obviously both the left back and the right back would be really high up the pitch. In the last couple of games, it's been pretty evident that it's been pretty much Tav that's been high up the pitch, whereas Barisic has been sitting deeper. That could be because he's maybe been tasked to sort of help Bassey and they'll leave him isolated with him having to play centre half. I'm not entirely sure, but I think with obviously games I've been watching at Ibrox this season, there's been a lot of space on the flanks against teams, and we really haven't made the most of it, just because as much as Tav's numbers in terms of assists and goals are still pretty good, if not excellent, his overall game or performances haven't been great, and the same can be said at left back. I mean, Bassey's done quite well when he's played, but we certainly don't carry the same threat for the full backs for whatever reason. So I think it was always going to be a case we had to try and address that, and it looks like Gio prefers his to do that via proper width, via proper wingers. I mean, Kent can do that. There's no reason why he can't. Hadji sort of less convinced because he's not exactly quick, but at the same time I thought Hadji did quite well in the second half, and obviously he helped create the second goal as well today. So we've got the players that can do that. There's no reason for us to be predictable and play the same formation or the same system all the time. So I'm just hoping under Gio we've got various things that we can do, whether it's the fullbacks that are getting pushing higher, whether they're having to sit back and we play with actual wingers, whether or not we play with a number 10 or two number 10s for, I know that annoys Ross, but that type of thing. There's various options, so there's no reason why we'll have to limit ourselves to one specific system.
Chris, you know, 2-0 cruising, as I said earlier on, looking like we're really going to blow this team out of the water. And then a really, really slack goal, and Connor Golson, I don't think, I mean, obviously he's been in the headlines most of the week for his comments after the Hibs game, which I think were taken slightly out of context, but I still think there was a couple of worrying things within what he said about where he is at the moment. You know, a long ball, and this has happened a few times I think this season, just a long ball catching us out, long ball, he misjudges it, and McGregor does well to make the initial save, but Bruce Anderson comes in and knocks it in. And again, I mean, it's happened so often this season. The only difference today was that we didn't go behind, but the amount of slack goals. I mean, you consider how tight we were last season. You know, the swing is quite worrying, and it's just so frustrating because we've done so well to get 2-0 up. It looks so strong and in a position of, right, we're going to go in and finish this game before half time. And all of a sudden, just because of one slack moment, Livy are back in the game and they get a bit of relief.
There was a warning sign for Rangers a couple of minutes before that, just after the second goal. There was a long ball get played up. It was actually a corner that nodded it down, and Bailey had a shot for edge of it. McGregor did quite well to save. If you're going to concede against Livingston, that's the type of goal you're going to concede. It's going to come from a direct ball played up the park or come from a set piece. You know exactly how Livingston are going to play. You know what threat they're going to cause. You can't be getting caught out by a ball like that. Now, you see it coming all the way. You have to know where the striker is, and if you're Calvin Bassey, you have to know where Bruce Anderson is as well. I think he can maybe have done better to maybe react a bit quicker. A great save from McGregor to block the first one, but Forrest should never have been in that position to get that shot. He really slacked from Golson, and just as you say, Colin, just a sloppy, silly goal. If a Rangers to lose, cruising in the game at that stage, that goal gives Livy a wee bit of hope. If it hadn't been for the World Cup save from McGregor just before the break, it can be a very different game, and Rangers almost snatching a defeat from the jaws of victory, but it didn't. Thankfully, in the end, it didn't cost them. But moments like that are becoming far too regular occurrence piece for a side that were so solid defensively last season. Barely gave up chances, never mind gave up goals, and there's almost a sense every day that are in games now when teams go forward, they look scoring, and that just didn't happen last season. That's if there's going to be one real marked improvement from the Van Bronckhorst side compared to the Gerrard side over the next 3 weeks, I think it has to come in a defensive sense.
And the thing is, like Frankie, we were speaking before we came on air the first time. You know, as we've emphasised all the way through the pod and the show so far, we were so in control. But then we lose that goal, and then like a couple of minutes later, as Chris has alluded to there, it takes a really good save from McGregor to keep it at 2-1. You know, I thought Borna was really slack at letting the cross come in. Wee bit of mayhem. I think it comes off our field. And I have to say, I think Alan Forrest probably has to. He's got to score there really, but great save from McGregor, keeps it at 2-1. But you know, in the space of like 2 or 3 minutes, you went from cruising and absolutely almost home and hosed, to almost being pulled back to level peggings. And the thing is, if it went to level peggings, you then don't trust this Rangers team in terms of dealing with the pressure. Then you know what I mean. So the frustrating thing for me was we were in control so much today, and especially as you said in the second half, we managed the game fairly well in the second half. Those 2 moments, that goal and then the save, could have been so costly if things had sort of went the other way.
Aye, it's really strange because I mean even if you go back to the Hibs game last Sunday, all right, Hibs scored pretty early, but before that I thought we started the game against Hibs really quite well. We really went at them right from kick-off, but for whatever reason, as soon as Hibs got the corner, and you could just kind of see a goal coming. There just seems to be a mentality issue this season there that wasn't there last season. Some people suggest it's the crowds. I don't know, is it the expectation? Are they unable to match the kind of confidence levels we had last season, or be able to lead for the front, if you like, and the expectation of being favourites to win matches? I don't know, but it's, as I said, it's something that Gio has to identify. I'm pretty confident he will. I'm pretty confident that the more games that we win, and we're still winning games, I mean, in the league at least, and we're still not losing a huge amount of games, certainly at league level, that confidence will return. And I mean, we've got to, I think losing Highlander's a big issue. Goulson, his form's been erratic, I think at best. I don't think, as I say, Tavernier's not had a great season, sorry. Barisic hasn't had a good season at all. So right across your defence, you're kind of struggling. I mean, even McGregor, I think last couple of games, obviously he's had important saves, and I'm pleased to see that, because I mean, before the Sparta game in midweek, I was kind of expecting or possibly thinking that McLaughlin would come back in, because McGregor just seemed to be struggling. He was another player. His body language didn't seem right. It's all kind of puzzling. Some sort of sports psychologist would probably have a field day looking at Rangers and comparing last season to this season, because it is really difficult to explain, and only the players themselves can be honest with themselves and say, well, we're just not playing well, or if it is a mentality issue, and it's something that we need to address, because today, Chris said it, I mean, we got away with it to a certain extent today. We'll not get away with it on Wednesday, because it's another cup final for Hibs on Wednesday, Easter Road. We've got Hearts in a couple of weeks, Aberdeen, Celtic at the start of January. The big games just keep coming now, so we need to be able to, I mean, I wanted to say, you can't play at a high tempo for 90 minutes, but you can play at a decent tempo for more than 20 minutes in the first half and 20 minutes in a second half. So we certainly avoid slackness, and that crept into our play today. I mean, Goulson was guilty of it, Kamara was guilty of it, Morelos was guilty of it. I mean, I don't know, Morelos today, I mean, I come in, when was the last time you seen Morelos sprint? Because it doesn't look like he can, to me, it looks like he can't run anymore. It's really strange how he's went right off the boil. but I mean, we didn't want to be negative. It was a good win today. I thought the second half we really played quite well. Actually, it was just the biggest disappointment was wasn't scoring more goals and putting the game to the bed earlier. And I mean, the manager identified that in his post match press conference. So he's well aware of the problem. So we can only hope that that's something that improves the longer his training time he has with him.
It does seem to be something that Van Bronckhorst has picked up on, because as Frankie's alluded to there, he did mention it in his post-match comments. You know, his sort of biggest frustration was, I think, I'm sort of half quoting him here when he said that we kept Livingston in the game for too long, which I think is a fair assessment. You know what I mean? Based on, I mean, even in the second half, I mean, we controlled the game well, but I thought we created a lot of chances in that second half, you know, and it took, you know, the Sakala goal towards the end to make the game safe. So it does feel like it's slight tweaks here. We need to smarten up defensively, you know, and stop conceding. But we need to be more ruthless as well. We need to start putting teams to bed, because when you do that, you know, then you can start giving some of your fringe players more minutes. You know, if you're 3-4 man up with half an hour to go, you can rest key players. You can get other boys on and get minutes in the legs. And it just feels like we're not able to do that at the moment because we're not being ruthless enough.
I do have a slight concern about that potentially catching up with Rangers towards the end of the season. They have had to put quite a lot in to get the position where we are at the minute, just by having to come from behind. And even if it's not like a physical exertion, there's a mentality issue as well, always having to come from behind. It will take a wee bit more out of you than blowing teams away, winning 3-0, and it would take your foot off the gas. And I just hope that doesn't, when it comes to in March, April time, I hope that doesn't come back to cost Rangers. Today I thought Livingston had a sniff, not because of anything overly impressive that they did in the game. Livingston had a sniff going into the last 20 minutes because Rangers didn't kill them off. And how many times have we seen that over the last couple of seasons? If you don't kill teams off, they can come back and bite you. These things can come back to haunt you. Thankfully today it didn't, and I don't think MD would argue if the Rangers win the game 3-1. That was I think a fairly fair reflection of the game. If that third goal comes after 55 minutes, after an hour, it's a far easier second half for Rangers. There was no need for that third goal to come as late as it did. As welcome as it was, it should have come far earlier for Rangers.
Yeah, Frankie, I mean, I think that's a good point that Chris makes there. You know, the amount of times we've been, I mean, even in the few occasions that we haven't went behind, you know, I'm thinking of Dundee, for example, up at Ben's Park. You know, the last 10-15 minutes, you're sweating. You know what I mean? You're grinding out a win and you're hanging on. There's a couple of nervy moments. And that probably does take a bit out of players, you know, especially mentally. You know, it becomes mentally draining, mentally tiring. And by the end of the season, if we don't start getting a couple of routine wins under our belt and, you know, and allowing ourselves to make some changes and mix the bodies up a wee bit, it could become an issue towards the end of the season.
Aye, I mean, I mentioned the previous management earlier, and you'll remember the game in the end of October against St Mirren at Paisley, when obviously we were 1-0 down quite early doors to a great strike, and then we scored 2 goals before half time and went in front, and we were playing quite well. You could see the sort of change in confidence of the players, and we went out in the second half, and the sort of first 15-20 minutes of the second half we did quite well, and we just couldn't score and get a third goal and to put the game to bed. And it was a bit strange. I remember Gerard made a couple of subs and then talked about after the game, said that it was obvious we weren't going to score any more goals, so he just wanted to shut the door at the back. And I found that quite revealing. It seemed to me just a lack of confidence and a lack of belief. So I don't know if it's maybe been coming for him at that point, and it's went down onto the players, and the players are kind of feeling that pressure as well, and so it becomes an automatic thing. Oh, we've not scored here, we've not killed the game off. Let's get a bit deeper. Let's take it a bit easier, and let's take our foot off the gas in an attacking sense, and have more cover at the back, and it sort of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy at that point, you know, and you've got to be. I mean, it's never a case of we're Rangers and it's teams like St Mirren and it's teams like Livingston who are well below us and their budget's a fraction of ours, but there has to be that bit more belief that we're better. I mean, we won the league at a canter last season. We were fantastic, and you're never going to match that. The stats for last year, the amount of goals that are scored, the shutouts, just the general manner of play. It was never going to be exactly the same. And obviously, Celtic, they're offering more of a challenge this year, or it seems they are to a certain extent. And the same can be said. Hibs are doing it. Hearts are doing it. Hibs were doing it. So is it just the players saying, are asking questions of themselves and just lacking that belief? I don't know at this stage, but it's something that I'm hoping that the new manager will see and he'll address, and it may be a bit more belief in the likes of him and Roy Mackay and Dave Voss when he gets involved with the team in training this week, that there's that change in mentality, and is something that doesn't cause us problems later in the season, like you mentioned.
This the third goal did come in. It came from one of Gio's subs, and it introduced Nathan Patterson, who seems like he's going to get game time in that sort of right hand side in the middle of the park. Sakala came on for Ryan Kent, and Sakala, I don't know how you feel about him, but in the early part of the season, I feared we had signed a bit of a, don't want to say dud, but he certainly had a headless chicken element to him, you know what I mean? And it was difficult to see, where he was going to go. I really did fear that we'd sign someone that wasn't going to fit in. And I actually looked at who would let Cedric Eaton go, and I was kind of thinking, well, I'm not convinced that this guy's a step up. He might actually be a step down. But recently, you would have to say, certainly since his hat-trick at Fir Park, he got a hat-trick for Zambia as well. He's looked a more confident player. You're starting to see now what he can actually offer the team. And I mean, the goal today, don't get me wrong, bit of dodgy goalkeeping there, but I mean, a great leap and a great header. And he'd had a chance just 2 or 3 minutes before that. He was really unlucky. A really good block stopped him getting the goal. So it really does feel like he's starting to find his feet at Rangers, and I'm starting to think we'll get a lot of goals out.
Those first few weeks, or the first couple of months of the season, I didn't think he looked like he offered any real goal threat. He looked like the type of guy, he's clearly got a bit of pace, he's very direct, clearly bundles of energy and enthusiasm, and all that side of it was great. I thought early on, he didn't really seem like the type of guy that's going to get you 20 goals a season. He didn't really take up great positions. He just didn't really have that knack of, if the ball's in the box, he's going to put it in the back of the net. That game at Fir Park might end up being the one that just kickstarts his career. I thought he played well when he came on. Was great to get his goal. That aerial ability is not something we've seen a lot of so far. If he can add that to his game, great. Or if he can bring that to the team, it does offer Rangers something that a wee bit different. Certainly compared to some of the other forward options. So I think that he's still, even though Morelos hasn't been in the best of form, I think he's still behind Alfredo in the pecking order. If you're going to pick a team to go and play Easter Road on Wednesday night, he'd probably still play Alfredo through the middle. But I think Sakala is now showing that he's not quite at that level yet, but he could potentially get to that level fairly soon. And those initial fears that you had, I had, and I'm sure many of us had, I think every time he steps on the park, and certainly every goal he scores, he is allaying those fears, and we are seeing what the management saw in him last summer, that there is something there. There's something that can be worked on. There is potential there that can be got out of him.
Such a positive character as well. You just want him to do well. I mean, every time you see him, he's got a smile as wide as a Clyde on his face.
I think that goes a long way to getting the fans on his side now. That he looks the type of player. Now, fans obviously don't know him, have no idea what he's like in the dressing room, but when you see him on the park, you can imagine what he's like in the dressing room. You can imagine what he's like in training. You can imagine him being a good influence round about the squad. I know Stephen Gerrard mentioned that a couple of weeks ago about settling into not just a new club, but settling into a new country, a new city, and just keep taking that transition time to really find his feet. And I think we're now really seeing the benefit of that. It was probably unfair of us all to expect this guy who's far travelled and got a bit of experience of moving around. Probably unfair to expect him to come into Scotland, to come into a huge club like Rangers with expectations of being a Rangers striker, hit the ground running and score a couple of goals in his first couple of games. now he has had that settling in period. So I think we are starting to see why. It's starting to see why he's here, and starting to see what he can actually bring to the side.
Frankie, in terms of Van Bronckhorst, as I said, his first domestic game, excuse me, frog in my throat here. Second game, two games, 2 wins. Definitely a lot of positives there, and I think we could all agree that there's a definite upturn in how the squad is looking and how the team are performing and stuff like that. But definitely things that could be tweaked and improved upon. But what's your sort of early impressions of Van Bronckhorst, and what are the main issues you think he needs to address going forward?
I think it's very early days, and I think we're not being fair if we're trying to find issues under his management for already. But I mean, there's existing underlying problems that we've discussed already, whether it's mentality, loss of form, confidence, commitment. Obviously, there's a lot of fans unhappy with the comments of Goldson last week, understandably so. I think there probably should be a bit of context applied to that. But nevertheless, there's definitely issues for Gio to address, and I'm kind of hoping that he'll do that. I mean, he's an ex-Rangers player. He was a player that I really liked when he was at Rangers. I followed his career actually because he was such a good player at Rangers, and I liked the way he adapted through his career. So he's nobody's fool. He's maybe fairly quiet and fairly unassuming. I wasn't at the game on Thursday, unfortunately, or the day. So I've not seen what he's like at the edge of the park and sort of dugout or technical area or whatever you want to call it nowadays. So I don't know how animated he'll be. Probably not too much, I would think. I think that'll probably come down to Roy Mackay or possibly Dave Voss. But I think what you will see is somebody that knows the game. So tactically, we should be well set up, and I kind of hope that his confidence and his own playing talent and record will rub off on the players in that sense. So I think already we've seen wee tweaks here or there. He did say that he would do that, and I think that's good because I mean not so much Gerrard, but Michael Beale got a lot of credit for his work whilst at Rangers the last few years. So already when we're seeing different kinds of systems being deployed, it's pretty good and pretty encouraging. I mean, obviously under Gerrard we've kind of struggled for the most part away at Livingston. I mean, I don't think we've lost many games. I can't remember if the 1-0 game when we got beat a few years ago. I can't remember if that was Gerrard or not. But today was a good improvement. The win over Sparta was a good improvement. A game towards the end of the game, I kind of think we maybe went into our shell a wee bit. To be fair, Sparta played a bit better towards the last sort of 10-15 minutes. So there's lots of good things and lots of things to be encouraged about, but it's still very early, and this is why I think so many fans were frustrated with Gerrard leaving just now. I mean, the guy is entitled to go whenever he wants, but as we go into December, where it's always a busy schedule, 8 games, we had a semi-final, we had the sort of 6-pointer against Sparta, if you like, last week. The timing was always going to be very hard for any new manager to come in and really hit the ground running, and it's the pressure's on. We all know it, Rangers, you can't afford to lose games or draw games even. So it's difficult to go into such a run of games and expect to win every single one. But he's got off to a good start. 2 out of 2 isn't bad. We now move on to Hibs, and hopefully we can get another good result, maintain this 4-point lead at the top of the table, and keep applying a bit of pressure to Celtic.
Chris, in terms of like from a sort of journalist perspective, what sort of differences are you finding with Gio compared to Steven Gerrard?
I think he speaks well. He handles himself. He's got that presence that you expect from a Rangers manager. He's not as open as Steven Gerrard was. He doesn't speak in the same at the same length. But Gerrard had a way of putting headline grabbing words into sentences or into bars of quotes that just like jumped out. I think from Broncos a wee bit more reserved. I don't know whether that's a tactic or if that's just him. But I think he has spoken well so far. I was at Ibrox last week for his unveiling. I thought he handled it well. Clearly, he's come in. He knows the club. He knows the score. He knows the city. He knows exactly what's expected of him. So all of the circus, if you like, all the outside bits away from the training ground, they're not going to put him off his stride. He knows exactly what he's walked into. He knows he's at a big club, fully aware of what the challenge is. So I think the biggest thing for a Rangers manager, and I've seen it with guys before Steven Gerrard, you have to get Rangers. You have to understand what the fans want, what the club's all about, what Scottish football is all about, what the media is all about, and he clearly gets that. So I think he's been a bit more reserved, and I think over the course of the season he will be a bit more reserved. He's not going to be as outspoken, if I want of a better word, than Steven Gerrard, but I think he has handled the first week well. And obviously the most important thing is getting results on the park.
Staying with you the new, Chris, and I'll also pose this to Frankie. In terms of his backroom staff, now obviously he's announced he's assistant manager. Roy Mackay's in there, and is there any concerns that there's no sort of local knowledge? Because I do remember before, when all the rumours after Gerrard left, you heard all the rumours about who was coming in. You heard names like sort of Neil McCann and all that kind of stuff, and Kevin Thompson. I mean, I think Kevin Thompson caused a bit of a stir on Twitter by posting a photo, which I'm not quite sure what that was about, but there was a suggestion that there was going to be some local knowledge in there. Any concerns that that's not the case?
For me, no. I wrote a piece in the paper on Monday last week about it, and I don't see it being that big an issue. I know before, when Pedro was there, they obviously had Jonathan Johansson come in to give him that in Glasgow Rangers knowledge. I think for Pedro it was important because he was an outsider. He didn't knew of the club, knew of Scottish football, had no real idea what he was walking into, and I think he needed that bit of a helping hand. I don't think Gio does. As I just said, he knows Rangers. He knows the game has obviously moved on here since his playing days, but he knows the expectations. He'll understand you are going to get games like today where it's a bit blood and thunder and a bit blood and snotters, and you can't play the expansive style of football that he wants to play. He'll understand Rangers and the media and the fans and all that type of thing. So I don't think it's as big a requirement for Gio as it was for Pedro. And I think it's more important for him to have staff that he trusts and that complement his skill set. I think that was one of the things that Steven Gerrard got right. He got guys in that could fill in his knowledge gaps. So Gary Mack gave him a bit of Scottish football knowledge. Michael Beale and Tom Culshaw did things on the training ground that he couldn't do. Jordan Milsom did work that he couldn't do. And I think as long as Gio builds a team that fits in to his strengths and his weaknesses, I think that's the most important aspect of it. Whether they've been at the club or they know Scottish football, if he has the Scottish football knowledge, that's almost a box ticked, and you then rely on Mackay and Voss and the rest of the guys to then add into his skill set.
What about you, Frankie? Any concerns that there's no sort of streetwise coaches that know the landscape and the team at the moment?
No, I kind of echo what Chris is saying there. Gio was at Rangers long enough to understand what the club is all about, what the expectations of the fans are like. The pressure is always huge. I just mentioned 5 minutes ago that you can't afford to lose games at Rangers. You can't afford to draw games at Rangers. So you'll be well aware of it. I mean, it's interesting that David McCallum's been on the bench the last couple of games anyway, and there's other guys through the club that'll be able to speak with Gio if necessary, if he thinks I need a bit of a hand when it comes to analysing the next match or what we can expect at maybe at a stadium that Gio never played at himself. So no, I didn't have a big problem with that. I mean, guys like McCann and Thompson, I think they're always pretty popular when they're on the TV, but I think there's a big difference between analysing games on the TV or on a podcast like this than actually being capable of having the respect and the wherewithal to run a dressing room, or to coach guys on a day-to-day basis, who they've all got their own sort of egos and things like that to manage. So I'm quite happy with it, with the management team he's put together. I mean, I don't know a huge amount about Dave Voss. Obviously, he comes highly rated. He's had a good 10 years at Ajax. He's worked with a lot of younger players there. He's got a good background and a good pedigree, and it seems like quite an exciting appointment. Roy Mackay's had a fantastic playing career, played at the very highest levels in various leagues in Europe. So I'm pretty happy with the team he's put together. Could you have had a Scottish guy in there? Possibly. Okay, it might have not been the worst idea in the world, but neither is it something that I'm overly worried about, to be honest.
It's the coolest name I've ever heard. Dave Voss, isn't it? It's just a mental name. Right, guys, on to games coming up, and it seems to be the case every year that December is an absolute killer of a month. We always seem we're always at either Pataudry or Easter Road or Tynecastle or all three. It just seems to be that's the case, and I'm sure it revolves around TV schedules and all that kind of thing. It's we're into the Christmas period, and it's the same this year. I was looking at the run of fixtures that are coming up, and they seem really important. It starts on Wednesday, really tricky trip to Easter Road, and you would have to say, Chris, definitely need to improve on the performance against Hibs from last Sunday. I mean, they are not a side in good form at the moment. After that game against us last week, they go to Dingwall and get beat. They were fairly lucky to get a result at St Johnstone yesterday. I think if St Johnstone won down to 10 men, they could have been looking at another defeat. But rest assured, they'll be up for it on Wednesday, and they'll give us a game.
It's the type of game, if you want to be champions rather than challengers, you have to go and pick up 3 points. It was something that Rangers did very well last season. I know Gerard mentioned the game through Easter Road. Morelos scored, mentioned that as one of the key games over the whole season, because it told them quite a lot about where the squad was. It showed their mentality and their mettle, and just that ability to go away from home to get a big result against one of your rivals, if you like, one of the better teams in the league. I think Van Bronckhorst will be looking for a similar thing on Wednesday night. Now, if you can go to Easter Road, a place that people maybe think, well, now Rangers might drop a couple of points there. If you can go and win, turn in a far better performance, obviously, than the Hampden game, it can be a real statement of intent win. That then follows on to Tynecastle in a couple of weeks. Do it again. Go to Pataudry. Do it again. If you do it, you then go and do it at Parkhead. You leave Parkhead going into the winter break in a really strong position in the league. I think if Rangers were to leave Parkhead 4 points clear, still at the top of the league, they'd be fairly pleased with that. If they can somehow put together a run that allows them to extend that, it's been a really successful start to Gio's Rangers career.
Sticking on Easter Road, Frankie, I mean, that's one thing you'd have to say about Steven Gerrard. He had a really good record there. A really good record against Hibs overall, and you would hope that Van Bronckhorst will continue that. It can be a tricky ground to go to, but I always feel that if you go there with the right mentality and in the right frame of mind, we get a result there more often than not. And given where we are, and given how important this month is, it's vital we get some sort of result.
Aye, we need to keep the momentum going. I mean, we've already talked about the manager and the pressure on him to hit the ground running. So we've done that. That's 2 games won. So the players should take a good bit of confidence for that. Hopefully, I don't know, maybe Balogun and Roof might be back available again for Wednesday as well. And I think Hibs are missing at least 1, possibly 2 players to suspension. I know Christian Deutsch, his appeal failed for the red card the other day there, so he'll definitely be missing. But I mean, Hibs will still pose us problems. I can only imagine they'll play exactly how they did at Hampden. I think they'll play effectively two up top with Nisbet looking to work well again with Boyle. And I mean, the problems they caused us certainly in the first half are still giving me nightmares, to be honest. So but as long as but I mean, Gio was at the game, he's seen what happened. It's up to him to come up with a plan to cope with that. And that might well be why we've seen Kamara play that wee bit deeper today at times and sort of drop in to make that three whenever we lost the possession further up the park. And I mean, because that's what Hibs did. They went direct, they went quickly to Nisbet, who quite unusually was beating Balogun for fun in the air. I would say that's one thing, that Bass is no fantastic. He's no fantastic in the air, so I can only imagine that Hibs will look to exploit that. But as you've mentioned, as far as I'm concerned, as long as we play well, then we should have too much for Hibs. We need to get them, start like we did today, and against Sparta, to be honest. We started that game fairly well as well. Try and get the early goal, certainly go ahead in the game, and then that'll make a big difference for us, because you can see this team, as soon as we score goals and go ahead in games, the tempo just rises and the confidence goes up and the morale goes up. So the more we can do that, the better. And there's no reason why we can't do it at Easter Road. I remember a couple of years ago, the game that we played, I think it was the 22nd or the 23rd there, and we were 2-0 up after 15 minutes, and then I think the fella Porteous, who doesn't like a dirty tackle, got set off second half, and Defoe obviously scored a third goal, and we absolutely cruised that game. So a performance like that would be pretty good. We're more than capable of it, and as I keep saying, it's the players just need to be made aware of that and have a bit more confidence in themselves, that bit of belief. Look at what they achieved last season, and just have that pride and that determination to go and do the same again this term. And if we can get a win on Wednesday, I think that would do wonders for that morale.
This it's end, December also. I mean, there's a couple of home games which I wouldn't want to say a routine, but they're not as sort of daunting as, we're obviously going to Tynecastle. Hearts are on a great run at the moment. Pittodrie, Aberdeen not on such a great run, but they always try hard against us, and they always up their game. And then after that, I think we're at Pittodrie on the 29th of December, then 2-3 days later we're at Celtic Park. So, really, really big games. As I said, it feels like a real pivotal month and a heavy month, 8 games. And I think by the end of those 8 games, we'll have a real idea as to where we are and how strong a position we are in terms of winning this championship.
I think so. It's definitely due, how you mentioned it earlier on, Colin. It almost seems like this festive period is always built up as a defining part of the season, and that always comes through just because the number of games, the intensity of this run, the intensity of these games, and I think it's even more so this year, just because the way the fixtures have panned out. The first tranche of fixtures, Rangers perhaps had it slightly easier, didn't capitalise on that as much as they could have done and should have done. It's now obviously flipped going through this second patch of the fixture schedule, and they need to show a wee bit something different. They have to show that they do have that mentality. It's basically what it comes down to. Now, all the teams they will play over the next few weeks, Rangers are better than. On the day, Rangers are better teams than all of them. It's how much do you want to, how much these players in this squad want to go and replicate last season, how much do they want to have another league title, and if they do, if they can find that within themselves, they will leave Parkhead at the start of January in a really strong position to go and win 56. If they don't, and those levels aren't there, and the commitment's not quite there, and the mentality's not quite there, it can quickly turn, because one bad result at Easter Road or Tynecastle can feed into another one at Pittodrie, can then feed into Bill Fun game, and you're really on the back foot, and Rangers can't afford to find themselves on the back foot and playing catch up. So it's a real chance for this squad to go and show what they're made of over the next couple of weeks, and I think we will be able to tell a lot about them over the next 5-6 weeks, and be able to tell a lot about where this season is potentially heading for us.
Is that essentially what it's about, Frankie? About how you view this, about the mentality? If you view it as a challenging few weeks and a challenge in itself, then you're struggling. If you view it as an opportunity to cement your reputation and to stake a real claim in winning this title, it's a different thing altogether.
Aye, it's something that the players should be relishing. I mean, we've not had a great season, so I mean that's obvious. We've not played well. Well, certainly, I think we've done okay in patches. some games we've done okay, some games we've done poorly. We've let ourselves down defensively. We've not scored enough goals, and there's just been too many key players off form. Okay, but we're still 4 points clear. We're still qualified for Europa League group stage, and we're still doing this despite losing our manager less than halfway through the season. So that that's a positive. That's good news that we're still in this position. So now you just need to build on that and say, like, we can only get better, or we should only be getting better. So December's a great opportunity to really stick the afterburners on and try and win every single game. Go in with that attitude. Doesn't matter if you play Aberdeen away or Celtic away. We're capable of beating these teams away from home. We did it last season. We've done it previously, and we'll do it again in the future. So let's do it this month. Let's just get in about it. Go and extend the lead at the top of the table and really put the cat amongst the pigeons. It's up to Celtic and it's up to the other teams to catch us. I mean, we welcome the chase. It's never been more relevant. It still stays that's still a truism. So let's prove it. Let's take this title defence and run with it. And December's a great opportunity to prove that.
Guys, looking at the time, I think we'll call it quits there. So a big thanks to Stuart and to Chris Jack for joining me tonight and giving me my thoughts. Great stuff from them as always. We're live tonight, guys, but the pod will be available to download and stream from tomorrow on a variety of platforms, including Acast, iTunes, YouTube, Castbox, Stitcher, Spotify. I said we were live tonight. I think we were live about 4 or 5 times. Anyway, we'll try and get a preview show out for the Hibs game on Tuesday night. We'll obviously have the show next week as well, next Sunday, looking at the game against Dundee. In the meantime, get yourself onto the Gersnet website and forums at www.gersnet.co.uk. Until the next time, guys, bye for now.